Before your alarm even finishes ringing, before your feet touch the floor, something has already been decided. Not by you, consciously, by habit. By whatever version of you showed up on autopilot yesterday, and the day before that, and the year before that. Most people never notice this. They think their day starts when they get out of bed. It doesn't. It starts in the 4 or 5 minutes before that, in whichever thought gets there first. There's a reason the hardest tested human beings in history treated the first minutes of the day like a battlefield instead of a formality. Not because mornings are magic, because that's the one window each day when nobody else has gotten to your mind yet. I'm going to give you 7 lines, not affirmations you repeat blankly at a mirror. 7 working principles, each one built by people who had far more reason to fall apart than you probably do today, and didn't. Say them properly, and they won't just change your mood. Over months, they rewrite what your default setting actually is. Let's go. Line 1. I decide what this means, not what happened to me. Frederick Douglass was born into slavery in Maryland. As a child, he watched his aunt beaten nearly to death for the crime of seeing a man she loved. He could have let that be the entire shape of his understanding of the world, that he was powerless, that his fate belonged to whoever held the whip. Instead, he later wrote that the moment he decided to fight back against an overseer who was beating him, even knowing the fight might cost him his life, was the moment he stopped being a slave in his own mind, years before he was one in law. He said the turning point wasn't the day he escaped north. It was the day he decided, internally, that his understanding of his own worth would not be handed to him by the people holding him down. That's the whole principle. The event and your reading of the event are 2 separate things, and only one of them is yours to control. Something happens today. Someone dismisses you. A plan collapses. A person disappoints you. The event is neutral until you assign it a meaning. You are always the one assigning it. Say the line slowly. I decide what this means, not what happened to me. Think of the specific thing most likely to test you today, and decide, right now, in advance, what meaning you will and will not let it carry. Line 2. My attention goes where I send it, not where it's pulled. Florence Nightingale spent her nights during the Crimean War walking hospital wards lit by a single lamp, tending to wounded men in conditions of total chaos, disease spreading faster than supplies could arrive. She later wrote that the thing that nearly broke her wasn't the suffering in front of her. It was the temptation to let her mind spiral outward into everything wrong with the entire war, the entire system, all of it at once. What she trained herself to do instead was narrow her attention, ruthlessly, to the one patient in front of her, the one task in her hands. That narrowing wasn't avoidance. It was the only way to function inside an impossible situation without drowning in it. Your daily version of this is smaller, but the mechanism is identical. Notification, headline, comment, comparison, all built to pull your attention somewhere you didn't choose to send it. Every pull you follow is a small vote for who's actually steering your mind today, you or whoever built the thing making the noise. Say the line. My attention goes where I send it, not where it's pulled. Name one thing today that will try to steal it early, and decide now what you'll do instead. Line 3. I choose the harder thing on purpose. Amelia Earhart didn't need to fly. She trained as a nurse's aide. She could have lived a comfortable, ordinary life entirely on the ground. She once wrote that she chose difficulty deliberately, repeatedly, specifically because comfort had started to feel like a slow erosion of everything she respected in herself. Long before her final flight, she was already in the habit of picking the harder route home, the longer way to learn a skill, the version of a task that actually cost her something, because she understood something most people spend their whole lives avoiding. Capability isn't built in the easy hours. It's built in the ones you didn't have to choose. You don't need a cockpit for this. You need one thing today you'd normally skip because it's inconvenient, and the willingness to do it anyway. Say the line. I choose the harder thing on purpose. Name the one thing you've been putting off precisely because it's uncomfortable, and do the first piece of it today. Line 4. This hour is the only one I actually have. There's a story, well documented, about a hospice nurse named Bronnie Ware, who spent years caring for patients in the final weeks of their lives and started writing down the regrets she heard most often. Almost none of them were about risks taken. Nearly all of them were about attention spent somewhere other than the actual present, working too much, worrying too much, postponing the people and moments that mattered until postponement became permanent. Nobody on their deathbed regretted a Tuesday spent fully present for something small. Plenty regretted the years spent mentally somewhere else. Most of us aren't dying today. But most of us also aren't here today. Not really. We're rehearsing tomorrow's conversation or replaying yesterday's mistake, anywhere except the hour actually in front of us. Say the line. This hour is the only one I actually have. Take one full breath and notice, honestly, where your mind has been living the last 5 minutes. Bring it back here. Line 5. What I build today is not just for me. Booker T. Washington, born enslaved, went on to found an entire institution dedicated to educating others who'd started with even less than he had. He wrote that the moment his own efforts stopped being purely about his own advancement and started being about what he could open up for people behind him, his motivation changed in a way that pure self-interest could never have sustained. Personal ambition runs out. Contribution tends to refuel itself. You don't need to found an institution. You need one person today who benefits from the version of you that shows up fully. A colleague, a family member, a stranger who has no idea they crossed paths with someone having a hard week. Say the line. What I build today is not just for me. Name one specific person your effort today could actually reach, and let that be part of why you show up. Line 6. What I love, I hold without a grip. There's an account from Ernest Shackleton's Antarctic expedition, less famous than the shipwreck itself, about how the crew, stranded and uncertain whether they'd ever see home again, made a deliberate practice of not pretending everything was fine. They talked openly about what they missed, who they missed, without letting that honesty collapse into despair. The men who held onto their people and their hope for home the most fiercely, and the ones who survived best psychologically, weren't the ones who refused to think about loss. They were the ones who let themselves feel exactly how much they had to lose, and let that fuel their will to get back to it rather than freeze them. You don't have to be stranded on ice to practice this. You just have to notice, honestly, what you'd miss most if today were taken from you, and let that noticing make you slightly more present with it instead of slightly more anxious about losing it. Say the line. What I love, I hold without a grip. Think of one person or one thing you've been taking for granted and give it a little more attention today than you planned to. Line 7. Whatever today brings, I will use it. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison, a significant portion of it in a cell barely large enough to lie down in. He has said, in multiple interviews after his release, that the years in prison were not simply endured, they were where he did the actual work of becoming the version of himself capable of leading a country out of the exact system that had imprisoned him. He didn't get to choose the 27 years. He chose, repeatedly, what those years were going to be used for. That's the last line, and it's the hardest one to actually mean. Not I'll tolerate whatever happens today. I will use whatever happens today, the setback, the frustration, the disappointment, as material, not as verdict. Say the line. Whatever today brings, I will use it. Whatever specific difficulty you're bracing for, decide right now what you'll build from it instead of just surviving it. Here are all 7, together, as a single morning practice. Don't rush them. I decide what this means, not what happened to me. My attention goes where I send it, not where it's pulled. I choose the harder thing on purpose. This hour is the only one I actually have. What I build today is not just for me. What I love, I hold without a grip. Whatever today brings, I will use it. None of this works as a one-time exercise. It works the way training works, repeated on the ordinary mornings, not just the hard ones, until the lines stop being something you say and start being something you simply are. The people whose calm you admire were not born that way. They built it, morning by morning, the same way you're about to start building yours.